Best Fleets to Drive For podcast. This is the beginning of a new generation of Best Fleets to Drive For podcasts. My name is Mark Morrell. I'm president of Carrier's Edge, and I am taking over the podcasts, or I will at least be hosting for the next few episodes. Normally with these, we do an interview with one of our Best Fleets top 20 winners or somebody else who's been involved in the program. But for this beginning of the new season, I'm actually going to interview some of our internal staff that participated in the program for their first time this year. So we've got some people that were involved in the interviews, involved in the scoring, and then involved in the massive hoopla that is the big announcement. I'm joined today by Val Corriero, one of our business analysts who did interviews and scoring. I'm also joined by Chrissy Cordingley, who was involved in the scoring process, and Sarah Chedji, who came in towards the end and got to experience the announcement in all its wonderfulness for the first time. With me, as always, to correct me and just throw a wrench into what I'm saying is our CEO, Jane Jazrawi. So welcome, everybody.
Can I just say, are you doing the hosting all by yourself for these? You did not discuss that with me.
You think this is the conversation to have in the middle of recording the episode of the podcast?
Okay, you can move on then.
Okay, you can tell Berenice where she has to do her edits now.
Yeah.
So what we're going to go through today is just get everybody's opinions on the experience, and they will be suitable for work opinions because there are lots of stressful moments and lots of choice words that get shared while we go through this. So let's take it sort of in order of the program itself. The first thing that we do once the nominations close is set up the interview process and go through the business of interviewing all of the people that are participating that year. So Val, let's start with you. And first off, what did you know about the Best Fleets program? What did you think it was going to be when you walked into it? What were you expecting?
Well, I was aware of the process of the program, right? But knowing the process is not the same to actually be involved in the program, in the whole process. You told me about it, both of you let me know that it will be a lot of work, but it was way more work than I was expecting at all. It was a surprise. I wasn't expecting to be such involved that it will take all my time to this. But yeah, it's a difficult process. It's not easy, and it takes a lot of work. Yeah.
And when you started, so we gave you some interviews to do, and I don't remember how many fleets you were assigned to go and manage the interviews for, but it'd probably be 20 to 30, sort of in that range.
Around 25, yeah.
Okay. And then you had to get familiar with the lengthy questionnaire and go through that process of reviewing and prep for the interview. So talk a little bit about what your process was for getting ready for the interview for each of those different fleet interviews.
Well, it was basically read the whole questionnaire and ask questions about it. Just put questions inside the questionnaire. If I needed some clarification, I ask Jane or you for help. And before the interview, you will review the questionnaire with me to be sure that everything was there, and if was something else that I need to ask. And yeah, it took me a while. It was because it's a very long questionnaire, and sometimes it's difficult to see if you have exactly what you need from the answer that they're giving you. So it was difficult. Yeah.
So when you're reviewing those answers, there's all manner of response in there. Some people are very brief and some people are very wordy. So did you find some harder than others to look through?
I think that the ones that are longer are the most difficult to go through, because sometimes you miss exactly the point of what they're answering you. So it's a little bit more difficult. Of course, if you have a very short answer, that also can be difficult, but you at least know what to ask.
Right.
You know that you don't have it, you don't have the some information that you need, so you know what to ask. But when the answer is too long, sometimes you get lost in the answer.
I find that all of those paragraph breaks are really important, and bullet
Yes.
points. Bullet
Yes.
points. We
For sure.
love bullet points.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you at least have parts of the information that you can disregard and then say, oh no, but they've got it here, they've got it here.
So the first few are going to be pretty intimidating because you've got a lot to go through and it's new and you're talking to these people for the first time. How did you approach it at the end versus the beginning? Or sort of what changed in your approach as you got more comfortable with it?
Well, I was way more confident when regarding how to ask the questions, and I already understood by that time that everyone was pretty nice, and they were as worried as me to get a good interview. So it was kind of like, yeah, that helped me a lot to relax. Yeah.
Did you find you were getting a lot more comfortable with the questionnaire itself and the kind of places where you needed to be looking?
Yes. Yeah.
So were there particular things that you knew that you would always check for when you were looking through one?
Well, yes. If you have a question that is asking specifically by numbers, you will look by the numbers, of course. And if you don't have the numbers, you will ask. And if there is in a specific format, also will be looking for the format. That kind of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were there any that you thought, okay, I know they always seem to miss this question, so I'm going to make a point of checking what they've got here?
Well, yes, there were a couple of them. The first one was the one of the exits. Many of them got the correct format and they give you all the information, but many of other companies didn't put much information in there. And yeah, most of the time we have to double check. And then about training cybersecurity, many of them didn't mention if the drivers are involved into that or not. Right.
Yeah, there's sort of blind spots where it doesn't occur to them to give that information, so you end up having to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jane, I know there's a bunch of places where you always check when you're prepping for an interview. So what are the ones that jump out for you?
Definitely anything with numbers. I also check, so DOT numbers, anything in the benefits, the 401k, the matching and all of that stuff. I also go through and I'll check to see total work environment. I check because usually what I'm looking for in total work environment is actually in a different part of the questionnaire. So we have one question that's about your retention programs and then total work environment. And often the retention programs question is what should be in total work environment, which actually tells us that maybe we should restructure that question a little bit. And we've talked Mark, you and I have talked about that. But I wanted to also kind of jump in and bring Chrissy into this conversation, because Chrissy joined us pretty much right when we started the Best Fleets interviews. So she didn't get to actually go through a questionnaire, but she got to watch me and Tiffany, and I think you hijacked a couple of other people.
Yes, you got to sort of be a fly on the wall for some of these, didn't you, Chrissy? So tell us about your experience for that.
Perfect. It was great because I'm nosy, so it was perfect. So I got to see what a lot of people were doing. My experience was good. You know what? Because I'm come back to the industry after such a long, like I went to a different industry for a number of years. It was nice to feel at home. It reminded me of, the core things about the industry. The good things about the industry have not changed, but technology and progress and stuff has definitely happened, which is really exciting. So it was a little bit of both nostalgia and also excitement, like, wow, look at where some of these companies, carriers are going to improve the experience of their drivers. The other thing I really loved was that although it's a competition, they want to be one of the best fleets. I think the part that made me feel really proud about being involved with you guys and Best Fleets was that so many drivers commented about, even if they weren't in the running, or even if they don't make Best Fleets, it's a process that they're going to continue to go through because they get so much better just from doing this with you guys, just from highlighting what needs to change or be improved on, or really reminds them of, yeah, these are nice to do things, but what is the driver actually experiencing when we put this stuff into place? So that was pretty cool.
Now, that's an interesting point, because it is a iterative process for most of the fleets that are participating in it, that every year they go through the process and every year they make some changes and they improve some things. So Chrissy, did you notice that when they were talking about it in their interviews? Did you notice them sort of reflecting on those changes?
Yeah, they did. And even because through the scoring, like later on, we got to the scoring and actually got to see the questionnaires in response to their interviews, to see sort of that progression from year to year to year for the ones that have gone through the process. So yeah, definitely, absolutely. It was just nice to know too, that they appreciate the whole process, not just the trophy at the end. They actually do want to have better companies, better programs for the drivers, and really work at these things, which is exciting.
There's one thing that I wanted to bring up, and it's that everybody who's on this call with us is coming to the program from a very different place. So Val works as a business analyst with us, and she actually created or did some of the changes to the Best Fleet system, designed some of those changes that we wanted to have, because the system evolves every year and there's a lot of things that annoy us about it, so we get them changed. And so Val was working on that. So she had actual prior knowledge of the system before she ever did it, and she was still gobsmacked about how crazy it was. And then Chrissy comes to us from a compliance, from the compliance side. So she works on my team in content and is our compliance specialist right now. So you guys both were looking at it from a very, very different point of view. And I thought that was really interesting, because we get very different people to actually do the interviews and the scoring and things like that.
Yeah, that actually gives me a couple of additional questions to throw in. But before I do that, Val, did you see that when you were prepping your interviews as well, that kind of year over year change in each of these fleets? That's part of the grind of prepping these interviews, is looking at what these returning participants had said in previous years, right?
Yeah, for sure. You can see that they're trying to evolve based on how was the previous year. And they also mention it during the interview. Sometimes they say things like, yeah, last year we realized that we should have done this because of after going through the process and everything. So with this year we changed this and decide to adopt this other idea. And yeah, they use the whole experience in order to get better.
Okay.
There was one company too that the owner or one of the GMs had come from a different company where they had done Best Fleets, and even though they weren't a Best Fleet, because they had improved so much as a company through the process, when he moved on to a different company who hadn't been involved with Best Fleets at all, he was like, this is the first thing we're going to do with me as GM. And they started the process again because he just found it so valuable, which is really
interesting.
And that wasn't the ones that you're thinking it was. It was another one. We have people who have done that. There are people who have been involved at one company and they go to another company. I'm thinking of Andy Winkler, who's at Chief Carriers now, or Scott Manthe, who's done it with 3 different companies. But no, that's starting to happen more, which I think is very cool.
So let's move on and talk a little bit about the scoring. So for both Val and Chrissy, you were involved at varying levels during the interviews. And so you had a sense of the data that was being collected. You had a sense of the things that we were asking to fill in the during the interviews. And then when it comes to scoring, tell me a little bit about that experience. How did that shift for you? Was it matching your expectations, or were there surprises that came up there? And Chrissy, I'll start with you this time.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I really liked about the scoring is I thought coming in, like my expectation hearing about Best Fleets is that we would collect all the data for one carrier and then just examine all that data and then give them like a final score. So, but it wasn't. It was very much like, here's a little piece of data. Let's grade everybody on this little piece. And then at the end, we gather all these pieces and that creates a score, which makes it pretty exciting because even when you announce Best Fleets, even us that scored are like, oh, that's so great, because we're just as surprised as everybody else because it is such a unbiased, completely objective, very methodical process, which is cool. The other part that I'm going to lose my train of thought for a sec. It happens. It goes off and on the rails. Was that just when you think that you start seeing yourself apply bias, like based on maybe the size of the carrier or location of the carrier, thinking like you're almost giving them like a golf score handicap almost, like, well, you're small, so, but then there's another carrier the same size or smaller that's doing even more. So it just blows away your whole perception of, where are you going to let them off the hook or not, right? Because for every person that had an excuse, another person had a solution. So that part was
that's interesting. And just a little bit of the sort of clarification on how the scoring works is once we've got all of the data collected, we score every question individually. So people are assigned they're not assigned a company to score, they're assigned a question. And so you go through and you look at all of the data that was collected for that question and figure out how you're going to score it. And sometimes the scoring matrix from the previous year is useful as a template. Sometimes it's completely useless. Sometimes it's totally different.
And we say this to all of you. Got a very long meeting where we said, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. And I imagine, like, was it surprising?
Yeah. So Val, did it match your expectation, or was it still a surprise?
It was a surprise. Yeah, of course. But I think that I was kind of very concerned at the beginning because I think this is kind of like the most important part of the whole process, that it will decide. Yeah, because everything is important. But if you think about it, everything will depend on the scoring. So at the beginning, I was concerned that how are we doing this? But then when you realize that you have one question each time and you have to evaluate each of the companies that are competing, that's kind of like, okay, so I can be very objective doing this. But then I end up with huge matrix and different things that, okay, some are doing this, some others are doing that, and sometimes it was huge and I had to redo the whole thing because no, that doesn't count, so let's do it again. And it took me a while.
Yeah, it's funny how you can burn a few hours just doing one question, because you get partway through it and then you're like, this is not feeling right. We're scoring too much on this one thing and everybody's doing it. You go back to the drawing board. Yeah. And then you get to the end and it's like, okay, you're twisting yourself about, well, should this one get this point or this other point? And then you spend a long time tearing your hair out over whether they get a 2 or a 3 on it, and it's 1 point out of 160 in just one thing. So it can be very stressful.
My approach to that is, can I defend this afterwards? Any score for any question for any carrier, we have to defend it. We have to say, well, you got a 3 instead of a 5 because of X, Y, and Z. And so that's always in the back of your mind. And when we were doing the scoring, that was the message that you would always get is that now we're going to have to change this because we can't defend it.
And actually, that's a
Or-
good point, because after each of you went through and scored a question, you would bring it to either Jane or myself, and we would discuss it.
Mhm.
And a lot of the time, what I found myself doing is looking through these and looking at these scores and sort of comparing all of the people that got this amount versus the people that got that amount. And I would often say, well, why did this one get a 3 when this other one that looks the same got a 4? And everybody had good answers. Like certainly the two of you and the others that were involved in scoring could always explain, well, yeah, it's this, but it's also this other thing, and they're doing it more often, or they've got drivers involved in it. There's always these little nuances that end up pushing it one way or another. So,
And just let me clarify that I redo scoring, Mark redo, we all go, we score it and then we're like, oh, that's not good. And then do it again. And then it's until, and then we, in our system, we can sort by score. So we look at all the 5s, all the 4s, all the 3s. And then you look at it again and you're deciding, is this working or is this not working? Is this fair? So it's really, how long did it take us?
it was 5 full days of 6 of us working full time.
Mhm.
So I guess sort of coming out of that for Val and Chrissy going through that scoring for the first time, what was surprising to you? You know, was there anything that jumped out that was really a surprise about the scoring?
I think that, well, for me, it was pretty difficult sometimes to not read between lines, to use just the information that was in the question and in the notes of the interviewer, and not to just assume, because if you read the whole thing, you can assume something, but it wasn't there. So you cannot score someone for someone that is not in the answer. So that was kind of very tough. I wasn't expecting that. So that surprised me a lot.
That's a good point, because there's a balance between only being able to score what's actually there, but at the same time, sometimes that information is in other places. So
Yeah.
you do have to hunt around for it. But if it's not there at all, you can't score on it. So yeah, that does complicate it. Yeah. Chrissy,
Yeah.
what about you?
For me, it wasn't so much the carriers that were surprising, but for myself, I was surprised at, especially in the beginning, how easily it was for me to go, oh, that looks really good on paper. Like that's a really good idea. Whether, you're more about the intention of it, but rather being reminded often by you and Jane to focus in more on, okay, that's really nice, but how does the driver actually perceive that? How do they actually live that on the roads, on the highways? That's really the purpose of this program. Is not so much we're the best company, we do all these great things, but how much of these great things are actually making an impact and a difference into the drivers.
Yeah.
As far as specific scoring, the one that surprised me the most that I was laughing at with you is, talking about pet policies. And I don't know if we're supposed to get into specifics, but I mean, one carrier made a whole dog park at their terminal, like those kinds of things. They're just like, that's amazing. Like and again, it's just something that, maybe it's not really a businessy thing, but it would make the drivers who have animals feel really at home. So it's that experience, right? So
yeah, that's a good example of wanting to get to what it really looks like for the driver. And it is easy to succumb to kind of the marketing. And even though we tell them, don't put marketing in there, tell us what's actually going on, there are occasions where they do it anyway. And we will generally try and sift through that. And every year I say, oh, I'm deducting points for this. I'm docking points when they put this in there. And it never ends up that I need to, because it always ends up working out on its own. But it's one of those things where you have to sort of look through it and say, okay, well, we strip away the marketing junk. What's actually happening? What does this look like in an average day for a driver? And that can be definitely a tricky part for sure.
Yeah.
So what was something that kind of surprised you, or that you found really interesting? You mentioned the dog park, Chrissy. Was there anything else that jumped out at you as being a good idea or really noteworthy?
The things that I really liked were things that really involved a lot of driver interaction, like not even just like a driver council or, but like actually having like driver led groups and programs where
Mhm.
the drivers were in the driver's seats. They weren't just they didn't just have like a driver group for social media. They had like the drivers had their own administrator. They drive the program for the drivers from their experience as drivers. So, I mean, that part I really liked. It just seemed very empowering for
Mhm.
the drivers.
Okay. Yeah, cool.
Mhm.
Val, what about you? Anything that jumped out?
I was thinking about one of the companies has a personality test in order to match the drivers. So I found that pretty funny, but at the same time, it's kind of a good idea. You will
Mhm.
realize that they won't have any issues between them if the personalities match, right?
Mhm.
So I found it pretty interesting. Yeah.
Mhm.
They
Yeah,
need one
that's
now
nice.
for what kind of truck should I drive, right? Like, am I a Kenworth guy? Am I a Mack guy? That's funny.
The other thing is that I think you guys learned a lot of jargon,
Yeah.
a lot of words that you may not have been aware of, and acronyms. I think at one point we had a list of acronyms that
Yeah, we do.
Mhm.
like what's TAT.
Well, we
And
have
we
there's
have internal
both.
acronyms as well
Yeah,
as
there's
in the
just
industry.
industry acronyms, and then there's also the Best Fleets process acronyms for all the things that we don't want to write out all the time.
Mhm.
So like Driver of the Year awards, we just put it as
DOY.
DOY, or people that talk about their open door policy, we just refer to as ODP to
Mhm.
just have a shorthand to save us some writing while we're doing things.
Mhm.
But that's an interesting point you bring up, Jane, that part of the reason that we get internal staff involved in the program like this is because you do level up on your industry knowledge very
Get a
quickly.
crash course.
Yeah.
It's
So
all trucking all the time.
yeah,
Yeah.
and Chrissy, you mentioned this as being good, sort of coming back into the industry. But do you feel that you really learned a lot, that you sort of are comfortable in how the industry works now?
I am definitely getting more and more comfortable. It was in a way a bit of relief that the things that I knew about trucking hadn't really changed.
Mhm.
But again, that they have progressed as far as technology, and that it was such a nice refresher. And of course I learned some new things. I mean, some of the technology also brings some
Mhm.
new stuff. The vehicles have gotten a lot bigger, that's for sure. They haul
Mhm.
different things now, right? And now, the e-trucks and stuff, that's all coming. So
Do
yeah,
you
so it's
find
good
that
to,
you're
yeah,
more comfortable with the prospect of talking to people in the industry now after going through all of that?
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yes, I'm excited. I'm excited to, it was really nice talking to the companies that we did. I mean, we the interviews that I had, I mean, the carriers, they were so nice, they were so open, they were so welcoming. They reached out on, LinkedIn after, they've stayed in touch.
Mhm.
So it's been a really nice welcome, and it
Mhm.
makes me feel really at home. So thank you for involving me.
Yeah. Oh, great. And Val, how about you? Do you feel a lot more comfortable about the industry knowledge now?
Oh, yes. I didn't know a thing about the industry before
Mhm.
this. So yeah, definitely. It was very I enjoy it a lot because I learned a lot about how this is for the whole industry. And one thing that how everyone has the same issue and they approach this issue in different ways, how they're trying to solve everything in different ways. It is very interesting. And yeah,
Mhm.
and how are they're trying to, most of them trying to approach the whole company as a family.
Mhm.
That's interesting. I know many companies say, yeah, we are a family and things like that, but you can tell, no, but you can tell that in this industry is something very important for the drivers to
Mhm.
feel like they're at home,
Mhm.
and that's very, very interesting and very different too. Mhm.
I like
I
that comment about the fact that carriers are all trying to solve the same problem, but they're going at it in different ways.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's like the personality tests. In some
Yeah.
cases, carriers are using personality tests to bring even dispatchers and drivers together. In some cases, you get just one board that's just for new drivers, and then you move on to a board. Some people were saying, you know what, you have to work it out, and we look at any conflicts with personality as a learning opportunity, so that you have to learn how to work with people that you don't necessarily love all the time.
Mm-hmm. Now that's good observations. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is I'm sort of observing everybody that's part of the program. I thought it was kind of funny that at the end of this process of going through the interviews and the scoring, that Val, you spent a couple of days putting together your list of all the things you want to change about our system.
Yeah.
Which I guess you kind of led a field test of your own designs, and you have a lot of things you want to change as a result. So
There'll probably be a lot of people who are going to be very happy about that.
Well, that was the BA in me, the business analyst. While I was doing the interviews or I was doing the scoring, I was like, yeah, we can do this in different ways. So I was like, lots of ideas to make things easier. So
So we'll be looking forward to the next year's edition and see what your enhancements are and how you've optimized the process.
Yeah.
So okay, so let's sort of take the next part of the program. After all of that scoring is done and we've figured out who the winners are, and you made an interesting comment, Chrissy, about being so deep into it that you didn't really know who was going to be the winner as you're going through each question. So when we finally put all of the numbers together and these people emerge as the winner, then we've got to tell the world about it. And Sarah, this is where we dumped a tornado on your desk.
That's right.
So let's talk a little bit about the announcement and what was involved in that. So I'll start with the same question for you. What did you think it was going to be like when you came into it, when you started getting ready for it?
Yeah, so I came from a different industry as well, outside of trucking. I'm used to big events and helping to plan those events. So I had an idea of the level of work that was needed. But coming in halfway, I think, was the difficult part. I missed the nominations. I missed the interviews. It's like I started in December. So like you said, it's the tornado. Here it is. Go and do. So I knew that there's huge shoes to fill on this, and that the community as a whole expected something that they've had in the past. So I think, coming into it, I was really worried about making sure that I captured everything that was required to be captured, that the carriers, the drivers, everybody were expecting in the end. So that was key for me, for sure.
And what about the amount of deliverables and the amount of pieces that needed to be put together? Was that a surprise, or did we adequately set your expectations on that?
No, you didn't really. Okay. I'll be honest. Really, I'm a very process oriented individual, right? So I need lists. I need to check my boxes. I need to cross things off as I go. So one of the main things that I had to do when I came on board was really look to see what's been done in the past. Has that been done? What's left to do? Who's doing it for us? We're a growing company, so we're having to beg, borrow, and steal talent from other parts of the business. I think I have a direct bat line to Jane where I'm saying, okay, I need somebody else to help with a graphics piece or something like that. So there's huge amounts of work to do. There was over 100 logos that needed to be created to help fill the needs for all the carriers. So for instance, if you're a Hall of Fame, one of the companies who go into the Hall of Fame, you get a series of logos. That series of logos are different from the 5-timers, the 10-timers, the top 20. So in the end, Mark, or Jane, you'll know the exact number, but there was over 100 logos that one of our graphic designers did.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And still the carriers are asking for more variations. So
never enough.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was one piece, but then the whole other side is the requirements for social. That's, our main platform to communicate everything across is Facebook. And there is an absolute voice that we use in Facebook. There's an absolute type of video or image that we put together with our message to help to support. And it's something that the carriers are used to and they expect. So they don't want somebody coming on board who completely comes in from left field, not running the program the same way that they have had it for the past 15 years, 15 plus years. So, you know, having to learn the voice and the expectations, both from an internal perspective, but also externally from what, you know, what our customers are expecting from us. That was really big. And I don't think you could properly prepare me for something like that. It had to be seen and actually worked on as we went.
And we did a lot of work on that,
Yeah.
because the voice and everything about Facebook especially has been me. And I have written nothing down. So
I don't know why there'd be a problem with that.
Yes, I know.
It was like, no, you just do it. Don't you know how to just do it? And what's really, and that's a challenge for both Mark and I. We created Best Fleets without ever having worked for another company that had done this. So we had no best practices. We had no, you know, we got some information from different other companies just to help us with the HR questions and things like that. But we have never done this. So it's the same thing with Facebook. I mean, I just kind of started posting on Facebook without really having an idea of what I was doing. I was just doing it. And so we do all this for a number of years. And then all of a sudden it's time to give it to someone else. And that was the hardest thing, is to teach you about the voice in Facebook. It was brutal. And you obviously thought it was brutal too.
Well, it's just there's a team behind it as well, right? So we all write in our own very specific ways, and being able to match your voice exactly, it will never be able to be done. But you know, we work on it, and we know, you know, the type of vocabulary to use or not use, and there's reasons why. So it's just, and I don't want to call them nuances, but it's just the little pieces that make up the big voice, and it's understanding those little pieces, for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the actual announcement process itself, because we had sort of a team effort, and I always feel like we're doing the announcement of the Oscar nominations or something, that at this specific time, this one thing will go out there. So yeah, talk to us about that experience, Sarah.
Okay, so you have a lot of feelings of power on announcement day. I'm not gonna lie. It's a little, it's unnerving, because it's like you're waiting. So to set the stage, it's 8:45. You know, there's the marketing team, Mark and Jane, we're all on a Zoom call, and we're making sure that we've got, you know, what announcement goes out first, second, third. We've got the order. We know what platform is being populated first versus the other ones, and so forth. It is a well orchestrated machine. But
this year it was.
This year, okay.
No past year has it ever been anything close. But yes,
well,
this year it was.
I'll tell you, the amount of mental energy that goes into that day alone, you cannot even measure it. Like, the stress levels are high. You're afraid of hitting send too soon in case you leak the news, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's difficult. So the minute that 9 o'clock hour strikes, it's go time, right? So it's like, all right, here we go. Everybody knew who was posting to what. We had to change banners, you know, and then within minutes, everything's posted, and then it goes silent. And we're waiting, we're like pigeons waiting for a crumb to drop. We're just waiting for that first like or share or something. We're watching, and then we're ready to go. You know, there's going to be drivers, there's going to be carriers, there's going to be, you know, partners. Everybody's got a comment, everybody wants to say something. So it's a matter of making sure that we've got all eyes across all these platforms, social platforms, to make sure that, you know, the conversations are happening and that they're being addressed and responded to and so forth. But I've got to say, the reactions from the community itself, once those posts were made, that is such a validating feeling that I got. I think his name is Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but from
Tim from Garner.
Garner Trucking.
Yeah.
They put together a completely choreographed, very small response to, they were assuming they were going to make the list, which they did.
Mhm.
So they soon posted a video of a complete celebration, complete with props, confetti. They had
Pre-printed stickers.
already made up.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, when I saw that, I was beside myself. I was laughing so hard. I'm like, the carriers, they love this. And
Mhm.
they do celebrate it, and they love the program, and that just made all of that stress kind of, I don't want to say go away, but you saw firsthand with responses like that just how important the program is to the community, and that was a really feel good moment for sure.
Makes you realize that it's worth it, right? That the effort is
Absolutely.
worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Excellent.
why I'm not very nice coming up to it. I was really stressed. And I'm usually not super nice when I'm stressed. And I'm also like, don't talk, anybody else talk to me. I'm like, until noon, no one gets to talk to me. We're just doing this. And
Well,
then
there's so many
maybe
moving
in the
parts as
afternoon.
well, right? Because then after all of those announcement goes out, the announcements are posted. We've got the press release that goes out. We sit for maybe an hour, and then we send a bunch of email notifications out, because we've got a lot of housekeeping that needs to be done at that point. So that's where I'm contacting all of the participants to give them some updated materials, make sure they know what's going on and what's coming next. And that's our plug for the convention in March, for everybody to attend that. And then a similar message for the winners with a little bit more specifics about things we need from them going forward, and then the fleets to watch and the Hall of Famers. So there ends up being, until probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there's a pretty much consistent flow of activities that need to be completed to just make sure that the announcement is done and all of the housekeeping around it is finished and everybody knows what's going on. And then you mentioned, Sarah, earlier, the logos, because we have to send out the logos, but only after people agree to the terms of use on the logos. So then it's this tracking of who has agreed to it and who has them and who doesn't. And like you said, it doesn't matter how many variations you do. Somebody says, hey, can you do one of these for me?
Yeah.
That would be great.
And we have already had one of those.
We've had 2, actually.
Oh, really? Oh, I
Yes.
didn't know about the other one.
Yeah.
The
we've
other
had a-
thing about logos is getting all the logos for the announcement.
Oh,
on
yes, the actual
banners.
fleet logos.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that was a fun experience for marketing, I think, because we have to have all of the logos of the top 20 in the Hall of Fame, but we can't ask them to give us their logos because we can't tell them that they're going to be winners. So we have to surreptitiously source these logos and make sure we've got the right one and a decent quality version that can go on the web and all of that sort of thing. And we have thought about having them provide them and just when they're at the finalist level. But this year there was like 93 finalists or something like that. So we needed like 28 logos. So there'd be a lot of things that we'd be asking people for that we never use, and it would end up causing other problems. So the process of surreptitiously scanning the web for the few days before and compiling all of these things, we're getting it down to a science now of being able to figure out where we need to go for logos. So it's fun.
And on
isn't it?
that note too, making sure that we have the right hashtags, the right mentions, the naming conventions for all of the carriers and so forth. So there's ones, they may be one year and change another year. So it's going back and making sure that you've got the most recent logos, hashtags, everything. So we've created a list this year where, hopefully it will help next year, where we've got a lot of that core information, and it's a matter of going back and checking versus rebuilding year over year.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing
This was another thing that was in my head that was never written down. And it was basically, I just had a whole bunch of different Photoshop files that going back years and years and years. So we never really had a process for doing it. So you were kind of, dumped in that can of soup. So
it's okay. I'm good with processes. We're good.
Mm-hmm.
We're good. The other thing that I didn't mention too that happens once we hit go, and as Mark, you said, the press release goes out and it's on the websites and so forth, is tracking all the media mentions that we get.
Mm.
So the pickup of the press releases, of course, the trade across the trade publications and so forth, and making sure that the information in those articles that are written is factual, right? You want to make sure that whatever's being reported is correct, and that, you know, the words are used properly, and it's you've got the people in the right categories. So that's also a big part of it as well. And then sharing some of those stories again across our socials as the weeks go on.
Just never ends, does it?
Never ends. Never ends.
Okay, well, as we come to the end of this episode, I am going to ask one question for all three of you, and you can answer however you like on this, but what would you like people outside of the process to sort of take away from this, or to know about the interviewing, scoring, and announcement process? If there's one thing that you would like to make sure that people are clear on, what would that be? So Sarah, I'll start with you.
Sure. I touched on it lately already, but the amount of mental energy that goes into the entire process, whether it is from the interviewing, the scoring, you know, the putting together all the messages and so forth. This program has been put together in a way that it's not a pay per play, which we've been told before, or it's been suggested. You know, when you go through the scoring, and there's going to be articles written about the scoring and the whole behind the scenes side of the program, you will see just how much work is put into this, and the amount of care and detail at every level. They're long processes because we want to make sure that the information is right. It's not skewed, and it's not based on, hey, we just like this carrier more than the other. There's none of that stuff going on. So it's a matter of kind of getting your head out of that mentality. It is a true program that is won based on the type of carrier you are, and that's it.
Okay, excellent. Chrissy?
I would definitely second that. The objectivity is phenomenal, right? Like it is earned. These Best Fleets logos, the awards, they're completely earned by the carriers. There is no doubt about it. It is so methodical and strategical. There's just no way to slant it any other way. The other thing I would say too is be proud even if you're a finalist, right? So it is a big process. It is a lot of work. And even if you didn't make it into the top 20 or the Hall of Fame, sorry, I think top 20 or the Hall of Fame, Hall of Fame, sorry. Hall of Fame.
Those are the people we don't like.
They burn, they're the worst sports. Yeah, they're the Hall of Fame. They burn, they're the worst sports. Yeah, they're the Hall of Fame. Yeah, but I think be very proud that you are a finalist. But I think because be very proud that you are a finalist. See what carriers that have done it years and years and years is how much they've improved, how much they've become better carriers, and how much their drivers appreciate being a part of the process, and the pride of being involved in everything. So
excellent. Okay, Val.
Well, I agree with the whole thing about this process. People doesn't understand the amount of care, responsibility, work, and dedication that we put into this. It's huge. If someone could sit with us during the whole process just to see how it goes, probably they will realize that it's not as it looked like. It's way more. It is very important for them to understand that not everyone can win. Of course, that's not the point. But yeah, I agree with Chrissy. Everyone can be very proud of being even in the finalist, even they don't reach the top 20, because finishing the process and getting into the scoring is not easy at all. They had to go through the whole questionnaire. That is not easy to do because it's long, and some of the questions are very difficult to actually answer. I'm guessing that it takes a lot of time. So yes, finishing the questionnaire, going through the interview, and get into the scoring after all the surveys, is actually pretty impressive. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I say that all the time. If you make it to the finals, you should be proud. It takes a lot of
Yep.
work to get there.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Jane, final thoughts before we wrap it up?
I sorry, I haven't spoken for a while. It's not so much a thought, because I talk about my thoughts about Best Fleets ad nauseum. So if you ever listen to the Carrier's Edge podcast, we're always talking about Best Fleets. But it's more about how happy I am that we were able to stop doing this, just the two of us.
Hmm.
Is that we have been able to actually move it out to different people so that they can have responsibility over it, and that we are creating a system that is repeatable. And I'm very happy about that, because one of our objectives is to move out of doing it ourselves and basically have a team who can do it, and do it not for us, but be part of that whole scoring process and interviewing process. Because we learned so much about fleets and how they work and the problems that they have just from doing this over the last, I think it's 12 years. Well, for me,
This
it's
was the
about
14th
10.
edition.
For you, it's 14. For me,
Yeah.
it's about 10.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy that we are able to kind of move beyond, and then other people can learn the same thing, the intricate things about this industry that I don't know if everybody knows about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, I think we'll wrap up this episode of the Best Fleets podcast. So thanks to Sarah, Chrissy, Val, and Jane for being my guests on this. The next edition, I believe, our next episode is going to feature interviews with our sponsors to talk about what they're doing. They don't know that yet, so it will be a very interesting episode. In the meantime, thanks everybody for listening, and have a great day.